Chica? Hey there.
I think I realized I forgot his charging cord for my computer.
Do you have a Mac?
Yeah.
I might have an extra one. Were you at 28 Liberty today?
I was.
Nice.
I left before the end of the day though.
Okay. I love the space.
Yeah. I wish it was a little more. I don't know. It kind of funnels you right into a desk or a meeting area. I wish there was a little more like, I don't know, social working space.
Yeah, fair.
But
maybe I have this cable.
I might be fine. I just didn't check.
Well, do you have any trouble? Oh, what's up?
Over here or?
I think we'll just be right here. You have your charger.
Let's see. I'll probably have something I need to put in.
Okay. The other in-person student is also will be here shortly.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I like the new space better than the old one, even though I wasn't in the old one for very long.
Did you not join that long ago?
Like end of September last year. So
same. I was there for 1 week and then they moved. So.
Bye.
Yeah.
Right on. Maybe that's the goal, to funnel you to like a desk or
yeah, it's a little hallway.
I kept getting turned around. I was like, I know there's cupcakes somewhere, so I'm gonna find them.
Yeah.
But now can I even get back to my desk?
I actually accidentally went yesterday. Showed up and everything. I mean, I didn't have my YubiKey. I realized as I was like arriving, so I knew that was going to be an issue anyway. I might have had to go home anyway, and then I was promptly told we're not open yet. Go home.
Oh well. Did they just straight up told you it wasn't like your badge scanned?
Well, honestly, I kind of was awkwardly in the front desk area for a few minutes, and I was like, didn't know where my team sat and stuff, and was thinking about. I pulled out my computer, and then I realized, well, I don't have my YubiKey anyway. I might not even be able to see what I need to see. So then I asked one of the people who works in the front desk, or one of the people that's helping set up the office, and they were like, sorry, are you here to work? And I was like, no. But yeah, I was early and I didn't have my YubiKey, so it was fine.
Bummer.
Yeah. How many times have you taught this class?
This is cohort number 4, but first time teaching it in this space. So it's a new era.
Yeah. Where do you usually teach it?
Are you familiar with the McKibben Lofts in Bushwick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I guess they're fairly close. You're heading out? Yeah. Okay. Adam? Yes. Welcome. You're in the right place.
I had a friend of a friend who lived there and went to one house party there, but it was infamous when I moved to New York 4 years ago, and around that time there were a couple of TikTokers that lived there, so it was kind of like this TikToker lives here, maybe we'll see them.
Yeah. I remember going to parties there 10, 15 years ago, and it was pretty grimy. And then when I learned that that's where all the Fractal University classes were taking place, like, a couple years ago. I was like, oh wow, blast from the past, but also it's really gotten a glow up since then. Did you have any trouble finding the place, Adam?
No, your photo was very helpful.
Yeah, that was cool.
I overshot the block, but that's on me.
Oh, and you have the IE cat.
Yes.
Excellent. Or yeah, cat.
I'm Cal.
Adam?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You're K Adam on Slack, so I thought,
K Adam or no Adam.
Right on.
Are you also X-ray?
No.
No.
We're friends through a friend's Slack.
Like this very amorphous and at this point sort of Slack community of Theseus group, where I knew some folks from college who introduced me to all of their friends, and we all lived in Boston. And there was this house that we all hung out at there that became an online community during lockdown, and then there's people that I've interacted with there, and we posted doing a music workshop. I said that sounds rad.
Nice. That's super cool.
It's kind of Baudrillardian. Like, it started out as the Slack to organize the specific house in Boston, and now it took on a life of its own. It was really great during COVID.
Most of the people that no one lives in that house anymore, and most of the people that did aren't significant participants in Slack anymore. So, but it's great ongoing force.
Was this sort of like a big community living in a house together?
It was like 4 or 5 different people and couples living in a house together. So there's maybe like 10 folks there, but then there was a big community of folks that would come by all the time. So it was a big crowd out there. How do you know all of them?
When was I introduced to Clarendon? Because I never went to the original Clarendon space. How did I even get invited to that? It was probably Morgue.
Okay, cool.
Did you have any trouble? Oh, you already have Ableton 11, so you're good to go. Did you have any trouble installing?
No, I got the light.
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
I think I put in the key and everything. It opened. I'm looking at a lot of stuff, but it opened.
It's a good start. Oh yeah, it's probably open to you probably want to do like file new, just because it's probably opening to some default project.
Okay.
Let's ask. To the folks on the live stream, welcome. Have you set up the? Did you have any trouble installing Ableton? If you want to sit on this side, or if you want to sit on this side, then you'll be able to.
Yes.
And there's also a power strip over here, so. Yeah, usually at the other place, I'm like on a platform and the projector's behind me, and like the people are out there. But this is different sort of configuration. But I think it's fun to have all of us here on the table together. So.
Yeah.
All right, great, Setson, awesome. Ableton 12 Lite's all you'll need for this. I won't have all the like effects and instruments and so on that the further versions of Ableton have, but that can come in due time. If you get really into it, you can upgrade Ableton, and like you don't have to you get a discount every time you upgrade, basically. Okay. So you're never like wasting money or throwing it away.
Unless you never use it.
Unless you never use it.
I've done this for 17 years.
Well, so you must have had it since like Ableton 5 or something, right?
But it had a box that tells you.
You've been in the music production business for over a decade. Well, let's get started. So welcome everyone to EDM 101, or the fancy title I like to give it is Approaching the Auditory Mythic, because this isn't just about learning how to make awesome beats that will set the dance floor on fire. It's also about discovering something about ourselves that maybe we didn't necessarily know was in there. Like, what kind of music comes out of us when we have the tools and the perception to be able to tune into that. What is our unique myth that wants to express itself through music? We're not going to have slides for most of these classes. I just prepared a few for just this first intro. So let's talk about what even is EDM? What is it? Let's do a little history lesson here, because I think it's fascinating to kind of look back in time and see, we've only been doing this electronic music stuff for not even 2 centuries, and it really kind of connects us to this particular part of human history. So in 1857, we had the invention of the phonautograph. So you could record sound, but not play it back. But the important thing here is like now we're etching sound waves into a physical medium. We're like capturing lightning in a bottle, basically. So now we're setting ourselves up to. You could even think of that as like a form of sampling, even though we can't really play it back yet. Took 20 years later to be able to actually play back those sounds. One of Thomas Edison invented many things. One of which was the phonograph, aka the record player. And now we can actually those carvings that we make in wax discs, we can actually play them back and listen to them. Amazing. For me, the next major development that's in music that's relevant to EDM is a genre of classical music called musique concrète, which of course means concrete music. But the key idea here is rather than having like notes written on paper and then you have the flautist play this and the pianist play that and the timpanist play this other thing. Instead, we're creating songs from specific recorded concrete sounds. So you would capture them on tape, and then you could splice the tapes together. And so it's not just like we want an oboe to play this notes. We want this specific, let's say, oboe sound or this bird sound. You could think of it as incidental music or Foley in movies, because this also is when cinema starts to emerge. So if you want to add like ambience to a movie, you'd have samples of recorded sounds, and then you play them back alongside the movie. So we'll come back to this idea later in the course. Things really start picking up here. In the 50s, we had Robert Moog invented the first hardware synthesizers, or at least he invented the first popular ones. And so now we're making music, we're making sounds with basically pure math and our ability to manipulate information as expressed by electricity. And this is kind of like the basis for the electronic dance music sound palette. Though of course people have been dancing to music for probably since the entire history of humanity, but now we're making sounds using media that we've never had this level of control over. In the 60s, we have turntablism, or as we like to call it these days, DJing. This is basically how EDM is performed usually. You play it back. Of course, you could play EDM live. Have boards, have people play drum machines. But a lot of what goes on at music festivals is people playing back records one after another and mixing them between the two. The key innovation here was not just playing back music on a single record player, but having two of them so that you can mix seamlessly between them. So, and this idea is important too for as we think about composition. Like, what is the context in which our music might be performed? Well, it'd be kind of in this flowing stream of other beats, so that can help give us some ideas for how we want to start and end our songs. In the 70s, we had the emergence of disco. This really started to bring what we now, modern EDM to life, to the dance floor. Producers would make specialized subwoofers and other speaker enclosures to really get powerful bass, and this kind of like highly embodied sensory feeling of the music is also really key, because with synthesizers we can make sounds that are very precise and reaching into frequencies that typical acoustic instruments can't get to. And part of you could call them product requirements of EDM is that we want to get people moving, we want to get people dancing, and get them out of their heads. So having that really powerful bass and listening to it in a group setting, so you kind of like dissolve into the group, is really part of what it's all about. In the 80s, we had the emergence of hip hop, which really took sampling to new heights. They would look back to old records from the 50s, 40s, etc. Take a little snippet of, let's say, drums. So there's the famous amen break, as it's called. It's like a specific 8-bar drum loop from this one record called Amen Brother, and the hip hop heads got a hold of it, sampled it, and created an entire genre of called jungle out of just that. I'll bring up a picture of this TR-808 drum machine because this is really a really key synth invention that honestly didn't sell all that well when it first came out, but it has this particular sort of booming bass sound that you hear in modern trap music, hip hop, rap, etc. So we'll definitely talk later about various 808 sounds, especially as we get into hip hop. But this, one instrument here created a whole genre and continues to have influence on modern pop and electronic music sounds. So we have hip hop to thank for that. In the 90s, we start to see the emergence of digital audio. So Pro Tools is a very high-end, what's called a DAW, a digital audio workstation, basically software for making music. So we no longer have to record to literal analog tape. We can record to computer hard drives. And this opens up brave new vistas of audio manipulation possibilities. We don't have to sit there and splice tape together. We can manipulate audio with computer algorithms, and we start to get what are called VSTs, virtual. Actually, I think VST stands for I think the S stands for Steinberg, which is the company that made the protocol. But it's basically like a piece of software that can do some kind of audio effect, or maybe it's like a recreation of a piano instrument, but digitally. And we'll definitely use a lot of VSTs in our production here, right? We don't have to, we want a violin, we don't need to go get a violin, we could just use a sample playback VST. In the 2000s, the internet started to emerge, especially high-speed internet, and so now distribution of audio and software becomes doesn't cost anything practically. Music is no longer locked behind the gatekeepers of the record labels as much. You can just publish your music directly onto the internet. We got CD Baby was one of the early pioneers for digital music distribution, and then we got YouTube shortly thereafter, Spotify, SoundCloud. So there's basically, at this point now, there's no barriers to anyone getting their music out to people who might want to hear it. In the 2010s, for me, this is like the era of the laptop. I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with Skrillex. His breakout dubstep album, Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, came out in 2010. He made that on like a MacBook. So now you literally just need one piece of equipment and you can make a Grammy Award-winning record. And I think one really mind-blowing way, for me at least, to think about how powerful laptops are relative to the challenge of music manipulation is like these days you go on Amazon, you get like a $200 used laptop. The CPU in that is like, let's say it's 1 gigahertz, and CD quality audio is 44,000 or 44 kilohertz. So that's like 45 orders of magnitude faster, or the CPU is like 45 orders of magnitude faster than the speed at the audio is being sampled. So if it took 1 second to produce one audio sample, one frame of that, the CPU is relative to that. The CPU would be waiting like 2 or 3 hours. So it really has a lot of time to do a lot of calculations to figure out what that next value would be. So audio is really moving in slow motion compared to how powerful our computers are, and so that allows us to push the sound manipulation further and further. And that brings us to the 2020s, 2025. I would say that AI is starting to, or is probably the biggest trend in that would impact EDM these days. Even aside from just using something like Suno or other products that can generate entire songs from nothing, you can also use them as for more surgical tools, like extracting the vocals from a song, or removing the background noise from a social media video that you might want to remix. So we can use AI to filter sounds in new ways that were never possible. And I personally, I use AI to generate music for like background music for my YouTube videos, but I still think that there is plenty of scope for us individual human artists to produce songs ourselves and really add that human touch and find out who we're all about in the process of making these songs ourselves. So with that little bit of background, we've only been at it for not even 200 years, so let us continue carrying the torch for the rest of humanity. Don't really need this. So just a little bit more preamble. Let me see if anyone has any questions. Oh, virtual studio technology. That sounds right. Oh yeah, Andre, we will, slides will be available if you want. Sure. So people often talk a lot about genres in electronic music. There's, a million of them out there, which is funny because a lot of people also say that all dance music kind of sounds the same. So which is it? Is it, are there a lot of different variations or not? But the way my college science fiction teacher explained it to me is genres are basically a collection of conventions. So like with trance, you might have a 4 on the floor beat is a genre convention of trance, or like if you're making a hardstyle song, you want this kind of like heavy, distorted tonal kick drum. I mentioned the amen break earlier. That one sample spawned this entire genre called jungle. And as part of your homework, I want y'all to look through this website called Ishkur's Guide. It's a classic. I see you got them recognizing that. It's a classic resource for exploring all the different variations of electronic music that exist out there. But for me, though, like genres are mainly about like understanding what kind of tools are in your toolkit for expression. Like what can you draw upon? What ideas can you take from these different genres and then combine them together in your own approach to music? I think for me at this point, I don't really think so much in terms of genres, even though genres can be good for like identifying keywords. If you're trying to find a certain kind of sample, they can be helpful. But it's basically like, for me, it's just like a bunch of ideas that you could put in your song and some things to try. So, on the one hand, don't get too hung up on genres. They're kind of like a map that you can use to maybe find certain sounds that you're looking for. And they're also fun, but don't feel like you have to know 1,000 genres to be a good producer. You really don't. And I think with that, let's start getting into some actual drum programming. So for today we're mainly going to focus on programming drums and getting ourselves oriented in Ableton. If you have other software that you want to use, let me just drop the link for Ishkur's Guide. There you go. Pretty easy to Google, of course, but so for this first session, we're mainly going to talk about drums. We're pretty much only going to talk about drums and get ourselves oriented in Ableton. If you use other software besides Ableton, that's also fine. Lots of successful records have been made with Fruity Loops and Logic and all these other ones. Yes, the keyboard shortcuts I talk about, they won't be relevant to you if you're not using Ableton, but so I think everyone here has installed Ableton. If you haven't, there's still time. And then the other thing I recommended was downloading some samples from Cymatics. There's tons of great free samples on the internet these days. Ableton does also come with a bunch of samples, though I think the lower versions don't have as many. One paid option that I use heavily is this software called, or this website called Splice. You basically pay some amount of money per month, you get credits, and you can use those credits to buy samples from all sorts of sample packs. And this goes back to that idea of musique concrète. Like, one of the main things that lets you get that sound you're looking for is to have access to high quality and really specific sounds. So a lot of these sample packs, like if you want to make a deep house track, you can find deep house sample packs that will get you there. But and you can also just look through the various sample packs and see what inspires you, and then pick and choose which sounds you like. That's also another way that we start to hone in on our particular sound, right? Because you can't put every single sound in the entire universe into each of your productions. You're by nature, like, that's kind of what our job as producers are. It's to select and filter and gather together a focused palette for a given sound. And a lot of people like to reuse the same sounds because it creates a signature fingerprint on their productions. So we'll get deeper into that later. But yeah, for now, for learning the basics here, we don't need like specific sounds necessarily. Yeah. So let's crack open Ableton. If you don't already have it open, now's your chance to open it. It might, I think if it's your first time, it might open you to a demo project. So you can just go File, New Live Set to clear everything out. And it's called Ableton Live, right? So a lot of Ableton's functionality is based around live sound manipulation or live performance. We're not going to get too deep into that into this class. Like, there's this whole other half of Ableton that makes it very powerful. But when you're ready to learn that stuff, you'll be well oriented within Ableton, and should be pretty straightforward. Just checking here to see if there's any questions in the chat. Nope. Okay. So when we open it up, here's our default view. Pretty maybe familiar to people who use other design, content creation type of software. Oh yeah, if you're seeing this view, this is the mixer view. Just press tab to switch to what's called the arrangement view. I think this mixer view also tends to play a bigger role in the live aspects of Ableton Live, and also when we get to adjusting levels, it can be helpful. But we're going to do most of our work here in this arrangement view. And along the left, we have this bank of all. This is where we're going to look at all of our sounds, our effects, our plugins, our samples. This is kind of like, and it may look a little different if you have an older version of Ableton. And then along the bottom is going to be like a detailed view of the currently selected track. So, here in my project, I have just this one audio track. So down here is every effect, instrument, etc., that is being applied to that track. Here in my case, I have an EQ and I have a utility. These are two different kind of effects that we'll get into later. Maybe worth mentioning, so I have an audio track here. If you want to, these tracks are for just pure audio information, like a vocal sample, let's say, or a snare sample or something. The other major important kind of track is what's called a MIDI track. So you right click, you can say insert MIDI track. And this stands for, I think, musical instrument digital interface, but it's basically a protocol for controlling software and hardware-based synthesizers. So instead of having raw audio information, raw music, we have a bunch of control signals that get sent into a virtual instrument, and then that produces sounds. So you may notice that when you created that new MIDI track, you have this this box down here that says drop instrument here. That's because the MIDI information isn't going to do anything until it's routed somewhere. So once we get to talking about VSTs, we'll start we'll start putting some instruments there. But for now, we can just get rid of this track you can highlight a track and press delete to get rid of it. And then maybe a couple quick keyboard shortcuts. If you want to insert audio tracks, you can press Command T on Mac or Control T on Windows. And then you can do Control Z to undo. And if you want to insert a MIDI track, it's Command Shift T or Control Shift T. Another thing to point out about different versions of Ableton is if you have light or intro, I believe they limit you to 8 and 16 total tracks respectively. The higher order versions let you have unlimited tracks, but you can do a lot with just a few tracks, and there's also ways to get around those limitations, which we'll talk about. Cool. So let's look in a little bit more detail here in this left panel, because this is where we're going. This is like our massive. This is our artist's palette of everything we're gonna use to make a song. So, so by default, your library, you start on this all selector, whatever, and this gives you literally everything. Every sample, instrument, effect, everything. You probably don't really want that unless you're just looking for something. It might be helpful to look at everything in case you can't remember what something's called, but in general, we want to look at something a little bit more specific. So this next section is called sounds. So these are basically a bunch of presets for the built-in instruments that come with Ableton. If you click on one, click and drag it into this empty space that's underneath where all your tracks are, it'll automatically create a new track with that sound on it, and then you can start playing it. I think. Am I getting some audio? Let's see. Oops. This might not be a good example. I usually don't go into sounds this way. Maybe if I bring this one in here. Let's see. Let me just do a quick sanity check. Okay, my speakers are on. Okay, well, not important, but in principle, you could take one of these sounds and drag it in, and it'll automatically create a new track. And then you'll notice that it by default turns on this little what's called the armed for recording button. That means this track is receiving, this MIDI track is receiving information from your keyboard. And there's this little keyboard icon up here. If you turn it on, then your laptop keyboard basically acts as a piano keyboard. And so in theory, you should be able to play the instrument using just your laptop keyboard. You don't need any external instruments. Actually, I'm gonna get some headphones out just to make sure I'm not going crazy here. Are people able to play some of these sounds and get some audio using their laptop keyboard? You may have to try some different sounds if they're not configured properly. Let's see. Oh. Okay, I'm hearing some audio from someone over there.
I'm not sure what's playing there.
Let me just try acoustic. No? Let me try a synth that I know works. let me do a little quick debugging. I heard something. Hold on, I'm going to restart my Ableton real quick. Bear with me, y'all. Oh, it's going out to the, okay. All right, there we go. That should fix it. You'll, the more you deal with computers and audio, the more you'll find little rakes to trip over. All right, now we should be good, I think. Sweet, okay, back in business. All right. All right, so let me start over here. So just to prove that I'm not lying to y'all, pull up a sound, pull up, some kind of random sound. Yeah. So using your laptop keyboard is a really easy way to just play sounds, and you can even write little melodies. Like if you're on the airplane, you don't have your little USB keyboard with you, you can use your laptop keyboard. So and the keyboard shortcut to toggle your laptop keyboard on and off is M. So M, just press M, it'll turn it on and off. And then another important one here is the Z and the X keys. So Z will make your laptop keyboard go down an octave, and then X will bring it back up. So turn on the keyboard. And the A key, that's a C. So it's basically C up to, I think L is the highest, which is a D note. So yeah. So everyone should be able to now get at least some sound out of their Ableton. So yeah. So there's a bunch of built-in sounds you can use. These are all presets for different VSTs, meaning a preset being like a pre-configured set of parameters that tell the synth what kind of sound to make. If you want just the synth itself, you can click this Instruments tab. And so these are all, like, this is obviously a much smaller list because it's just like the raw software from which all those other sounds are programmed. But this can be helpful if you want to get into some custom sound design. Next set of tools is this audio effects one, and this one's really important because when we're doing sound design, we often want to enhance our sounds with different effects. Maybe we want to put some reverb on it to give it a sense of being in a certain space. Or maybe we want to put a chorus on it to give it a sense of width and ethereal swirling kind of quality. There's, millions, maybe not millions, but there's, more effects out there than you could ever use in your life, and there's only more being made these days that can do all sorts of different kinds of audio manipulation. But throughout the course, we'll cover a lot of the basic ones and show you how you can use them to improve, get the sort of sound you're looking for. So those are all in audio effects. And another thing to point out about those specifically is, even though they're called audio effects, you can put them on MIDI channels as well. You put them on either an audio or a MIDI channel. Basically, you just click and drag it into your into the lane down here at the bottom when you have the track you want to put the effect on, and then you create what's called an effects chain. Basically, the output from one effect goes into the input of the next one, and on down the road. So in this case, I have a beat, like first the beat repeat will apply to the audio information, and then that signal will get applied, the chorus will get applied to the beat repeat, and then so on. And this is important because depending on what order you put the effects in, you'll get different tones. and it can make a huge difference in what order you put things. So, and I'll give you all some tips as we start getting more deep into sound design as to like how you might want to arrange those. But that's how audio effects work. They go on the right-hand side of this lane down here. You may also see that I've got these little like red dots next to some of the effects. So with any sound, sample, instrument, preset, etc. in your library, you can right-click on it and give it this little annotation like favorites or one of the other colors. And for sounds and effects that you use regularly, it can be helpful to add them to your favorites so you know how to get to them quickly. You then click on this favorites tab up here in the collections section. And because I mean, as you can see, there's like so many different things one could choose from here. So narrowing it down a bit can definitely help. Next section here we'll look at is drums. So these are all drum kits. They use a instrument called the drum rack. And again, with these, you can just click and drag one into that empty space underneath where all your tracks are, and it'll automatically load it up. Today we will talk a bit about, or we're going to talk about drum programming, and we'll get deeper into the drum kit effect here. But these are basically a bunch of pre-made drum kits that you can use to get a certain sound. This is like a really fast way to get a bunch of related drum sounds together so you can start making a beat. They all have these little what are called drum pads that allow you to trigger the different samples. You click on them. And of course you can use your laptop's keyboard to trigger them as well. But these are a lot of great go-to pre-chosen drum kits that you can use to quickly get started with your productions. And you can always swap out the samples later, so it can be like a good. So like a good workflow could be just pick a drum kit that sounds decent, start making your beat, and then later come back and swap out the samples as you need. And of course, if you select them, you can see a little preview of what they sound like. So if you want to audition them and try them out. What is this, Rasputin? Like rah-rah Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen? Could be. Actually, one of the assignments, maybe we could use that as an example. So yeah, so there's our drum kits. And then moving on, we got MIDI effects. So we have audio effects that can manipulate audio information. We also have MIDI effects that can manipulate MIDI information. The main difference here is that MIDI effects can only go on a MIDI channel. And they also, let's see, let me add a new MIDI track. Well, let me add just so you all see that. You'll see that if you drag an audio effect onto your MIDI channel, you'll see this drop instrument here bit. So MIDI effects actually go before the instrument that the MIDI information is causing to make sound. And that's because we're taking the stream of MIDI data, we're applying some transformations to it, like this scale effect is going to be, in one of the later sessions, we'll use this to basically auto-tune our MIDI to make it easier to play melodies without having to know as much theory. So it'll go before our instrument. The MIDI effects chain will process the incoming MIDI data. It'll feed that into our instrument. Maybe that's like Serum, let's say. It's an example of a VST. And then the VST will output audio, and then our chain of audio effects will further process the sound. So that's just one little wrinkle with MIDI effects compared to audio. I heard my Discord go off. Oh, looks like it was the wrong octave. If you see oh yeah, good point. Good call out. Yeah, I think by default the drum racks, the lowest note that a sample is on is C3, is what's called C3. So for those who don't know, the names of the notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. C3 is like middle C, and if you if you pull up a drum kit, you can see like the lower drum pads here don't actually have any samples on them, so they won't get triggered. But this lowest one down here is, actually I'm kind of surprised it doesn't at least show you what note that is, but yeah. So let's see. Oh, go ahead.
Is that something you can like get a sample pack or something to add, or does it just not go below?
Yeah, so you could drag additional samples down here, like just pick any old kick. You can drag it because there's 128 pads on this VST. So most of them, in fact, aren't going to have anything on them. And then once we start programming some drums, I'll show you a little bit more. But you can see that it'll, when you create a MIDI clip, it'll have a lane for each of those samples that are in the drum rack. I'll show you how to set that up here in a second. Just about done with the orientation here. I'm not too familiar with the modulator section. I don't tend to use that. Max for Live gets into some of the like really deep, powerful live sound, well, not even necessarily live, but Max is basically this like programming language that's specific to Ableton that lets you build your own effects and stuff. So you can often get free or paid instruments that use the Max programming language for Ableton. So that can be another way to like add more sound manipulation possibilities. This plugins one though will be used. This is where your third-party plugins, VSTs that you might get outside of Ableton, that's where these are going to live. And in a later session, we'll set a couple up so y'all know how to do that. But you don't necessarily want to limit yourself to just what comes with Ableton. So it's nice to be able to get those third-party softwares and bring them into your productions. Clips are kind of like samples that you can drag in. I don't tend to use them all that much, I'll be honest. Samples, this is where a lot of your, like when you make a project in Ableton, the individual snippets of audio will show up here. That's why a lot of them have these like timestamps after them, because they're coming from projects. Grooves we will touch on a little bit today. These are basically like, they shift the timing of notes that you program to give them like, well, a groove. And we'll show an example of that here in a second to create some like a swung feeling to make your drum sound funkier. Tunings is pretty advanced. Like if you don't want to use the standard what's called equal temperament tuning, you can literally adjust like what frequencies each note maps onto. If you want to get like a really particular, say, ethnic sound, or you want to do some really experimental stuff, you can use tunings. I wouldn't worry about that too much. This template section, though, is helpful because one way to speed up your workflows is to have a template that already has all of your like tracks and effects and instruments that you tend to use a lot. So you're not just starting from a blank slate every time. You have like you have a starting point. Like maybe you have a drum kit you really like, so you'll put that in your default set. And that's most of it. Excuse me. You may want to, so for those who downloaded the Cymatics samples, you may want to add it. You may want to click this add folder button down here and go and select that folder where you extracted the samples to, so that then you'll have access to them. They'll show up down here. You can also click on this user library, and this is where like all of your personal samples, loops, presets, etc. will be stored. So like if you create your own audio effect preset, it'll like here I've made a various racks for doing different things. They'll show up here. So if you make like some presets that use a lot, they'll show up here. All right, so now we're extremely well oriented in Ableton, right? Any questions about what we talked through? Anything that wasn't clear? Anything you'd like me to dive into more? Okay, sets and ask, is Max for Live a node-based way of controlling your audio effects / composition? Yeah, I think you could do some like algo rave stuff with it. I personally haven't messed around with Max too much, and I think it doesn't even come with some of the lower versions of Ableton, but it does. I think there's some way to open it up here. Max audio effects, maybe. Yeah, so you could like, and it can get pretty deep. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but definitely look into it if you're interested in like going deeper on the sound manipulation possibilities with Ableton. I would believe that, Adam. Oh yeah, and as you can see, Max takes forever to load, so don't click on it. Okay, so with all that preamble, let's actually make a beat. Oh wait, sorry, I realized I was muted there. All right, we're gonna talk about making drum beats. And we'll do a few different workflows for making drum beats, just so we all get some practice, like actually using the interface and dragging stuff around and playing it back. Because the part of the learning curve here is getting used to the interface, and once some of the keyboard shortcuts are under your fingers and you kind of know where to look for things, it becomes a lot easier to execute your musical ideas. So, so for drums, in our first workflow, we're gonna just use audio tracks to make our drum loop. So we're gonna drag audio samples onto our timeline view here, into our arrangement view, and we'll start by making a really simple, basic house beat. House is a very encompassing genre with many subgenres, and it's characterized by sort of what's called a 4 on the floor beat. So the vast majority of EDM is in what's called common time or 4/4 time. You can see that up here. Basically, just means there's 4 quarter notes in a measure, so 4 beats in a measure, and we'll set our tempo up here to 128. The tempo that your song is at also has a drastic effect on how it will be perceived. It's also a component. It's also a component of various genres. So like house is at 128 often. Psytrance is at 150. Lo-fi can be at or Moombahton can be like at 100 or 110. So tempo will play a big role in your as an artistic choice in your songs. And higher tempos typically mean that the song feels faster. But we'll do 128 for now. And let's go ahead and grab any old kick drum sample from our library. You can hit Control F or Command F or click the search bar up here, and you can search for samples. So just type in kick. You should get some. You should get a lot of options here. Look for ones that are .wav or .aif or .aac. Some other like in my case, I have this Kick 2 VST that shows up. I don't want to use that here. I just want like raw audio samples. So I'll pick, I don't know, like this 80s cyberpunk. Here, I'll turn the big speakers down a little bit. I'll pick this 80s cyberpunk sample, and I'm just going to drag it into the timeline here at the start of the measure. You'll see it shows up. You can see the shape of the waveform looks real nice. Maybe some interesting things to point out. Here at the beginning, you see where it's like the waveform is really dense and bunched up together. That lets you know that there's a lot of high frequency content there, because the the waveform is moving up and down really fast, like so fast that it's quite dense. And then as we get deeper into the sample, it kind of spreads out, and that lets us know that, hey, this is lower frequency information. And for a kick drum, the kick is really the beating heart of your track. It's what people feel that in their chest when the bass is kicking. It's really the backbone of your drum track, and which kind of kick you choose can have a drastic effect on like how your song sounds overall. So I just picked any old random kick for this example, but and in this case, you might notice like your waveform may go a little past the second beat. By the way, you can zoom in and out with your either by rolling the mouse wheel forward, or sorry, holding control and rolling the mouse wheel forward and back, or you can pinch to zoom in and out if you have a trackpad. So I want to make a 4 on the floor beat. If you're zoomed out this far, the numbers here, those are like the measure numbers, so measure 17, measure 19, etc. If we start zooming in, we see the decimals start to appear. So 17.2, 17.3. That's the first division of the measure into smaller chunks of time. And these are like the individual beats. So remember when I said there's 4 beats in a measure, these are those 4 beats, 17, 17.2, 17.3, 17.4. So we want a 4 on the floor pattern. We're gonna select just the one beat, and then we can press Control D to duplicate it. We'll do that 4 times, or Command D. And make sure you're only selecting the 1 beat's worth of time, right? Like, don't select this whole sample if yours goes past the end of the beat, because then you'll start to drift out of time. We don't want that. Like, the nice thing about using the computer to make music is that it can do things perfectly. So
how do you select?
Yeah, so you can select, in this case you can click and drag. So I'm clicking like right here at the end of the first beat, and then I'm dragging to the left, and it should snap to your grid automatically. Is that working for you?
Yeah, I just must have clicked on the dark parts and it was like dragging it around.
Okay. If you click up here, if you put your cursor up at the top of the sample, it turns into a hand, and you're kind of dragging it around like that. And maybe an alternative is I can, if I put my cursor here at the edge of the sample near the top, it turns into this bracket, and I can shorten the sample or lengthen it. So I could also just shorten it so it lines up with the beat, and then duplicate it 4 times. Another option is if your sample is too short for the beat, you can also just select some of the blank space and the sample, and then duplicate it several times. And so it would look like this. But if you manage to do that, print these 4 beats, then you should get, and you then click to put your cursor here at the beginning of the measure, and then you press spacebar to play. You should get a nice 4 on the floor beat. So everyone give that a shot if they haven't already. Can you paste multiple times? When I hit paste, it does it once, then I have to. Let's see.
Didn't have a long clip, so I don't know if you.
So, Henry, to answer your question, you can use Control D to duplicate your selection as many times as you want. So I can do it like this. And then, of course, once you've put those 4 beats, you can also select the whole group. You can click the first sample and hold down Shift and click the last sample up at the top here, by the way. And that'll select all of them. And then you can duplicate those. So using the computer to just make a ton of music real fast just by copying and pasting or duplicating a whole bunch. So you can do like bigger blocks of time there. Another really helpful function is the loop. So up here you have this like this Ouroboros kind of shape. If you select a certain amount of time that you want to loop, you can select it, click this loop icon. Actually, sorry. Just clicking the loop won't do anything. You have to press Control L or Command L, and it will set the loop boundaries to the length of your selection and turn it on. And now, when you press play or press spacebar, it'll just jump back to the beginning every time. So, right? And this is really good when you want to work on a loop and not have to, constantly be manually jumping back to the beginning. And you can, adjust certain parameters, adjust the timing of things. So that can be really helpful. Cool. And maybe another thing to point out here real quick. Well, actually, I'll talk about it when we get to our hi-hats. But all right, so we got our kick drum. We got, the start of a epic house track. Now let's add a clap on the second and fourth beats. So look in your sample library, find a clap. It doesn't really matter which sound. I mean, it will matter eventually, but not for now. Actually, I'm going to look at one of my favorites because there we go. Okay. So we're going to click and drag that one onto the second and the fourth beat. And you'll see here in this case, it's not as long as a single beat. And I'm going to select the first two beats here and duplicate those, and that'll make it line up on the fourth beat of the measure the way we like. You could also just Control C and Control V. Different ways of doing it. And now when we play it, we're starting to get even more of a nice house beat sound. And I think the clap tends to be used in house music because it harkens back to our tribal ancestors. Like, the clap, like being able to clap is a very basic human ability. A snare drum, which is also a common instrument used for this part of the drum beat, requires a little bit more technological innovation. But we've been stomping and clapping ever since, well, maybe before we were what we would consider humans. Was everyone able to get the clap sample going? Cool. And maybe now's a good time also to point out why this even sounds good in the first place. So if we look at the EQ on the kick sample, so I have the kick track selected, you'll see it's hitting pretty heavily here down in the lower frequency section of my EQ. And then if I look at the clap channel, you'll see that it's hitting more in this like mid to upper mid section. So the kick is covering the low frequencies, the clap is covering the mids and highs, and so together they're doing different jobs. And so when they play at the same time, they're not fighting for space, they're not contributing lots of energy to the same part of the spectrum. They work really well together. And this is an idea I want y'all to keep in mind as you get deeper into production, is like the idea of giving sounds specific jobs to do and not having them compete for space. And both compete for space and or space in the frequency spectrum and space in the time domain. So I know many of you probably know already that the range of human hearing is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz. So that's kind of the range of frequencies we're dealing with here. And when I talk about low frequencies, a rule of thumb you could think of is anywhere between 20 and 200 hertz. And then when I talk about mid frequencies, we go from 20 to 2,000 hertz. And then high frequencies are 2,000 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So those three different bands there, kind of highs, mids, and lows, is an organizing concept that will come up a lot. And maybe also worth pointing out that audio is on a logarithmic scale. So in the lower frequencies, the frequencies are spaced much closer together. Or sorry, they're how to explain this? Actually, let me not get too deep in that for now. Let's just remember that the kick drum is doing the low frequency stuff, the clap is doing the mids and some highs, and they work well together nicely.
How do you get the EQ to show up at the bottom?
So EQ8 is a plugin that comes with the higher versions of Ableton. So if you have light, you won't have it. You can get. We'll talk about some some free third-party plugins you can get that'll allow you to visualize it. Like there's one from Kilohertz that does pretty much the same thing, at least in terms of being able to see what's going on. Not important for now, but we'll get to it.
Also, may I borrow a charger?
What you got? You have the
USB-C. Sorry about that.
I think this is going to be a battery burning operation.
Sorry, I might. Actually, do I have Ableton installed on my work laptop? Oh wait, maybe this is maybe it'll work if I. Sorry, we're just getting some power. Maybe it'll work if I just plug my laptop into your. Oh, I think I'm draining your battery now.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be doing anything.
Never mind.
I don't have the right cable.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There might be another cable around here, but
There's a bathroom around here, actually.
there is right over there. Okay. Let me see. I did not. Okay.
I'll just
I should bring a charger next
time.
time. All good. Okay. Oh yeah. So I don't know if y'all heard my discussion of the EQ there, but yeah, EQ8 comes with, I think you need Ableton Standard to get it, but there is Kilohertz Essentials. If you want to jump ahead in the program, you can try installing these yourself. They come with a 3-band EQ that will show the frequency spectrum. Not super important yet, but all right. So we've got our kick and our clap, and this is a very common kind of like TikTok sort of pattern where you have like, do, tsh, do, tsh. And you'll see that pattern show up a lot at different time scales in electronic dance music. I think it's like a really kind of natural back and forth rhythm that creates a sense of groove. And so let's show another example of how that shows up. So now we're going to add a open hi-hat, and we're going to add it on every other eighth note. So what's an eighth note? It's twice as fast as a quarter note. And now's a good time to point out this little grid resolution indicator down here. So it says 1/16. That means that each of these little slices here is 1/16th note. If I zoom in, you'll see that the grid resolution increases. It gets finer, and we zoom in on the waveform. And if we zoom out, you'll see that it gets smaller. Now this is every line is 2 measures. The first number is the numerator is the measures, and then the denominator is the beats or subdivisions. So this is each tick here is now 1/8 or 1/8. So you can zoom in and out to get that. If you like the zoom level you're at though and just want to change the resolution, you can press click into the arrangement area, and you can press Control-2 and it will make the grid more coarse. You press Control-1, it'll make it more fine-grained up to a certain point, and you have to zoom in more. I and obviously Command if you're on Mac. So for here, we want it at eighth notes because we're going to put open hi-hat on every other eighth note. And this will start getting that, that boots and cats sound, if you've ever seen that video. So grab a hi-hat, an open hat specifically. Maybe I'll point out what a hi-hat even is. It's a drum that looks like this. So when it's open, the sound rings out for longer. It takes up more time. And when it's closed, it's like a short little tick, kind of a choked sound that we'll get to. But for us here, we want more of an open sound because we want a little bit of length to it. That's good. This one might actually be a little bit too short for artistic purposes, but we're just going to drag it in and drop it on the second eighth note in the measure. So we don't want to put it on top of the kick drum. We want to put it just off to the side, and then I'm going to shorten it so it only lasts for 1/8 note. And then I'll duplicate it 4 times, making sure to also select that empty space at the beginning. So now it's now we have an open hat on every other eighth note. And it doesn't really matter that the sample is kind of clipped off here, because when the transient, like the attack part from the kick and the clap come in, you're not going to be able to hear that the hi-hat suddenly fell off, right? You have psychoacoustically, you have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of how we perceive things. And I like to say that we don't hear things as they are, but as we are. And you also notice too, we've got that same kind of TikTok pattern going on, right? Doots, 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 doots. But it's like happening twice as quickly as the kick and the clap version of that. So if you do that right, you get something that sounds like this. Right? Probably heard that a million times before, that kind of sound. But one of the mysteries for me about EDM is that even though we know what it's going to sound like, we still enjoy hearing it. And that's where this, again, that music concrete idea of like this specific sound combined with these other specific sounds creates a certain mood, groove, ambience, etc. And also that is one of the creative tensions in EDM too, like balancing this need for a repetitive groove so that people can lock in and really dance to, but not have it be so repetitive that people get bored. So the eternal challenge of this genre, or of this type of music. Let's go one level deeper to complete our first workflow here. We're going to add some closed hats to create a bit of motion and like create a bit of more of a like speed, I guess you could call it. So I'm going to, so now I've got my grid at 1/16. I'm going to find a closed hat now. So it's like shorter because, the 16th notes, they don't take up as much time. So I don't want to use a very long sample. I want one that's like loud enough. Okay, this is fine. Probably not necessarily what I would choose, but drag that in. Make sure it's only 1/16 long. I'll duplicate it. And philosophies vary here, but I generally don't like to put a closed hat on top of a open hat unless I'm doing something specific with the sound design, because first of all, they're going to fight for the same part of the frequency spectrum, right? They're both kind of these high frequency instruments. And, realistically, you can't play a hi-hat in the closed and open position at the same time. So I prefer to, not have it there. And in general, I would recommend trying to keep your productions sparse, because that way, you can manage the complexity that will emerge as you start adding more and more elements in your track. And it'll be easier to mix your tracks too, because you won't have a bunch of instruments competing for space with each other. So generally I like to leave that space open. And then we'll just select this whole beat and then duplicate it 3 times. And now we get kind of like the full spectrum. Right? So that's like a very basic house beat. And we used this workflow is purely audio based, right? Like we have audio samples. Like this is literally what the speaker is doing as you're playing it back. And this is nice because it's really vivid, right? Like you can see, you can line everything up. You can see exactly what's playing. It's very immediate, right? But if you ever want to change these out, like pick a different sample, you have to go in and like redraw or recreate the entire beat. So it can be a less flexible approach. So has everyone been able to get what's the shortcut to shorten the sample? Okay. Andre, could you post a screenshot in the Discord? Sorry, what was that shortcut to shorten the sample? Okay. If you put your cursor on the edge in the upper right corner of your sample, you can click and drag it to shorten it. If you do it on the other side, you could also shorten it the other way, but generally wouldn't be doing that here. Let's see. Any audio sample I place at the beginning of a measure sounds like this. Super fast. Yeah, Andre, once you post that screenshot, maybe I can get a better sense of what's happening. Maybe now's a good time also to talk about like some project management stuff. So you can, obviously you can file save your live set as, something like EDM 101 session 1. You can also export your audio here. So you can basically select the whole 4 beats here. Doesn't matter which channel you do or which track you do it on, but select a certain amount of time that you want to export, and then you click File, Export Audio and Video. By default, it will render the length of your selection, and you can optionally have it encode an MP3 of your audio, but by default, it'll export a full uncompressed WAV file. And then you click Export, of course, and then it will go wherever you tell it to export it to. I'll put it there, I guess. Now, when I can just go to where the file is and play it back. And
are you able to save like this project such that you could like send it to us and we could open it?
Yes. That though is a little fraught because since I have like the highest version of Ableton, I don't think you'll actually be able to open it, or even though like I'm not actually using any advanced features of Ableton. Well, I would need to delete all these EQs, or they literally just won't even load for you. But in principle, yes, you could save the project itself, the raw project, and send it out. And I will make those available.
You can reopen it later.
Yeah, like on a different computer. You just need to make sure you have all the same plugins installed. Like if I'm using some third-party stuff, you would need to make sure to have that installed as well.
So like if you don't have some of the, like this drum sample on the computer you open it with, like it won't load?
For that, you always want to make sure to, you want to click this Collect All and Save button. So that'll make sure it brings all the samples from wherever they are on your computer into your project folder. And then you like zip it up and then you send it over to your friend. And then they'll have all the audio. Because otherwise it'll say like, sample is offline, and then it's no good. I see a couple people typing in the Discord. Oh yeah, Cameron points out, makes a good point that if your CPU is running hot because you've got a ton of like VSTs and effects going. Oh wait, we're going till 8:30. We're not running out of time at all. One way to save CPU, and I think this is what Skrillex did a lot of in Scary Monsters, is basically bounce tracks down. And that can also be good for you creatively too, because it forces you to commit to specific artistic decisions. You're not just like leaving everything always open and up in the air. You know, it helps to like, you know, decide something and then move forward.
Is it also like a workaround option if you have a light version and you can only have like 5 tracks or something like that? Could you just save like a bunch of them that you've made to a wave file and then add that as its own track?
Yeah, you can do that. So we could take at some point I'll show a technique called resampling. You basically like create a new audio track, have it record whatever it hears, and then it basically reduces it to a single track, and then you can delete everything else. So, yep.
How did you put it on the like 1/16th level? Is that just through zooming or?
Yeah, so you can zoom to change the resolution of the grid. Callum was asking about the grid size here, or you can press Control 2 to make the grid more coarse. So kind of like zooming out. You press Control 1 to zoom in, make the grid more fine. It won't let you do it infinitely, but yeah. So if you like the level of zoom that you're at, you can use Control 1 and 2 to change the grid size. Actually, a couple more things before we move on, since I forgot we were going to 8:30. Let's talk quickly about a technique called consolidation. So you'll see here that I have like 4 individual kick drum samples, but maybe, you know, if I know I'm making a house beat and I'm gonna want, you know, generally speaking, I'm gonna want a 4 on the floor pattern for my kick drum. Maybe I want to combine all those into a single audio sample. So I can select them all. If I right click, I can say consolidate. You can also press Control J. And basically, it like renders that selection into a single block of audio that I can now move around as I see fit. But if I ever want to, like, you know, do something glitchy, for instance, or like add a little drum fill, I can always select a small piece of it and Control D to duplicate it, so I get a sound like this. Right. So just because I consolidated it doesn't mean I lose all possibility of manipulating the sound. But now I can move it around in bigger blocks, right? Or if let's say I have these hi-hats, right? So I'm gonna select all of those. I'm gonna consolidate them. Now I have, like, you know, one set of closed hi-hats here. Now I can apply one of those grooves to the hi-hat samples, even though they're audio. So one of the things that Ableton is really good at is time stretching audio while keeping the pitch the same. So, and that's, we call that warping in Ableton. It should, when you consolidate a clip, it'll automatically turn on warp, but it won't actually change the sound yet, because, you know, it's the clip is at 128, the project's at 128. I haven't changed anything about the sound yet, so it'll sound exactly as it is. But now I can take one of these grooves. I go in the groove pool. Maybe I get one that I really like is this swing 16ths. You can, you know, click on one and preview it. You can hear how it sounds like da 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 instead of da 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 da. So this is a way to add groove and funkiness into your production. So select one of these groove patterns you like, and then drag it into. So I have the clip itself selected here on the track, and then I can just drag it into this section here. You'll see that it applies the groove, and now when I play it back, you'll hear that kind of sound. Might need to turn it up a little bit. Or I'll pick a really obvious one. Let me pick the swing, the 73. Bring this down a little bit. Or
does the groove show up? Is it just like on top of that hi-hat? Or...
Yeah. Oh, you can actually literally drag the groove onto the clip itself as well. It won't visually. It will not like shift the sample around. It's doing this because, but you'll see which groove is being applied when you look at this drop down here. You can also get rid of it, and you'll hear it goes back to being da 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 da, straight again, kind of more robotic, or we get that funky groovy sound. So that's a way to add, because the computer wants everything to be perfect and tight and robotic and quote unquote perfect. But we want to, like, one of the other challenges of EDM is how to like add in some more kind of organic flavor to our sound. So a quick way of doing that is with this groove concept. And I chose a swing 16th groove too because these are 16th notes. If I try to apply a 16th note groove to, say, the open hats, you won't hear anything because the 8th note that is being played here is not being shifted off the grid at all, so you won't hear any difference there. Is it possible to replace a sample in bulk? Well, that's what I was saying about why you would want to use MIDI instead of audio. But I think there actually is, because like it knows what sample it's looking at here. I would have to look into that a bit. We've spent a good amount of time on this particular workflow, so let's go on to a workflow where you could actually do that much more easily.
Can we one more time see
Yeah.
how to add a groove again?
Yeah. Sure. So I've got my audio clip here. It's warped. I think if it's not warped, the groove won't do anything. But then you go into this grooves panel over here. You can see the whole universe of grooves available to you. And then you can either drag it onto the audio clip itself. You can, if you have the clip selected, you can drag it onto the clip parameters unit module. I'm not sure what they call it in the manual. And it'll show up here in this drop down. You can change it out. And as you add more, you can then, like, it'll expand the list of grooves here. Were you able to do that?
I've done it. I just did not hear any difference, but that might be
Which
you
also, so first of all, press A because you've got the automation. Or you can't put on work if you press A. Okay, take off automation mode. Okay, now, so if you want this to work, you want to consolidate your 16th note hi-hats into one clip. Yep, and now.
Cool. We got it.
Nice. All right. Any other questions? No. Okay. All right. So now let's look at MIDI. So can either maybe I'll also point out that you can select multiple clips across multiple tracks, and then you can duplicate those. So you can also speed things up that way. Let's talk about another option here. So you can create a new live set. Make sure to save your work so you can refer to it later. By the way, you'll see that I have a bunch of stuff here already because my template has a bunch of preset configuration in it. So now let's start by creating a new MIDI track. So you probably won't have any effects on it by default. So you'll see it says drop an instrument or sample here. So let's go back and grab a kick sample again, whatever one you like. If you click and drag it into the MIDI, the lane for the MIDI track, it'll automatically create this instrument called a simpler. which basically lets you play back any sample at various pitches. And later you can, if you want to change it out, you can just drag a different sample into the simpler effect. It's got a bunch of different ways to parameterize it. By default, it's set to trigger mode, so no matter how long a MIDI note you give it, it'll play the entire sample at that pitch. And now if I want to, now I can, I can again use my laptop keyboard to play back the sample. You'll notice that the pitch changes as I go up different octaves on the keyboard.
When you change the octaves, like, is it changing is it just changing the playback, or is it actually changing like what you're saving in your project? Or like, are you actually changing anything, or is it just like the way it's playing? It's just like changing the volume.
When you change the octave of your laptop keyboard going into the synth, it's sending a different note into the synth, and that will change how the synth processes this or outputs the sample. So by default, in simpler, your samples aren't warped. So as I play higher pitched MIDI notes, it'll play back the sample faster and faster and faster, which we'll perceive as the pitch going up, and it will also get shorter and shorter. Or if I play lower notes, it'll play the sample back more slowly, and they'll sound lower pitched and kind of looser and so on. If you turn on warp, it'll keep the length of the sample the same, but it will just change the pitch using a fancy algorithm. So there's the sound by default. If I click warp, you'll hear now that it's like pew, whereas if I turn it off, it's like shorter because I pitched it up, but I can go all the way up there. So different creative ways one can use it. For our purposes here, let's see, make sure I'm playing the right note. For our purposes here, we just want to play the default home note, which in general, if you play middle C, you'll get the sample at its original pitch. And if I go in here, now we're basically gonna create a MIDI clip here to automatically send notes to our synth. So we'll select one measure's worth of time, and you can right click and say insert empty MIDI clip, or you can press you can select the amount of time and say Control-Shift-M, insert a MIDI clip that way, and then you'll get this what's called the piano roll view, because it's based on old player pianos where you have this like spool of paper with a bunch of holes punched out in it, and that would cause the piano to automatically play.
How did you make the simpler thing again?
Yeah, how do I make this simpler? So if you have a MIDI track, it's a MIDI track. By default, it won't have anything in it unless you have that configured in your template. I grab a kick sample or whatever sample I want. I click and I drag it into the lane for my MIDI channel, and then it will automatically create a simpler for that sample. That makes sense.
And you're dragging an effect?
No, this is a sample, so an audio clip. It could be any length. Like if I have like a loop, I could bring it in there too. And this lets you do some interesting things where you have Ableton detect where the transients are, and then you can like play loops as instruments. Pretty, more advanced stuff that we'll maybe have a chance to get into later. But for now, we just want like a single kick sample. And let's see. Damn, still running. If I was impressive. All right, so we'll select a measure's worth of time here. Press Control-Shift-M to insert a new empty MIDI clip. This isn't really super important for drums, but by default it does highlight the notes of the scale that you're in, and that's configured up here at the top of your project bar. Like my project's in C major. So it highlights the notes of C major. That's another way to keep yourself playing notes in the right key. But for our purposes here, we just want this note C3. So it plays the sample at its original pitch. And if you press, you need to basically click on the top of this MIDI clip to select it, and then you get this piano roll view down here. And this too has a note resolution grid. So I want to do a 4 on the floor groove. I'm going to set this to 1/4 right up here. And again, you can also do the Control 1, Control 2 thing to change the resolution. And then I will press, you can press this pencil icon up here, or you can press the B key to toggle between select and insert mode. But once we have our pencil selected, we can just draw 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. Oh, right, I want to change the tempo back to 128 up here. And you can do all the same, copy and paste kind of things with these MIDI notes as you can with, with audio. So I could just select this first note and duplicate it several times. I can duplicate it once and then select both notes, copy them, put my cursor here, and then paste them, and I get 2 more notes. But one thing that's immediately different is we have a lot more control over the parameters associated with these MIDI notes. So down here at the bottom, by default, you'll see what's called the velocity of each note. This basically means volume, like how loud, how hard you're hitting the note. It ranges from 0 to 127. And if you click and drag these up, they'll be louder. I generally prefer to use other ways of adjusting the volumes of notes, but you could, if you wanted to make all of your kick drums quieter, you could, click down here, press Control A, and then drag them all down. They'll all be quieter. You can also, when we get into some hi-hat programming, we'll show how to adjust the volumes there to create kind of an organic feeling. But for this, I like to just, for the kick drum, generally you're going to want it to hit at the same velocity every time, and you want it to be, full volume. So just move the velocity up to 127. There's a lot of other parameters we could tweak, but just want to point out that one. Cool. Oh, by the way, you don't have to leave your tracks named MIDI. You can right-click. You can select your track and right-click and say rename, or you can press Control R, call it kick. And then like I said, if you want to change the sample, you can just click a different sample from your library, drag it in. Oh yeah, I wouldn't want that one because that's already got a beat, so I get this. But I rather liked my prog trance kick. All right, so now let's add a clap. So Control Shift T to insert a new MIDI channel. Rename it to clap. Pick a clap from our library. It's a nice one. We're going to click and drag it down into where it says drop instrument here on the MIDI channel. And then one way we can quickly do this is we'll take our 4 on the floor clip, and copy it, and we'll paste it into the clap channel. So nice thing about MIDI data is that it's agnostic to what sound you're using, right? So I can just take those same notes. Then I'm going to click in here. I'm going to delete the first and the third beats. So I get this. I want to turn up the clap a little bit. By default, the simpler is set to -12 dB, so you can just zero it. You can set parameter values, by the way, by clicking them and then typing in a number. It's actually probably a little too loud, but it's okay. Oh, by the way, this slider here on your track is the amount of gain or the amount of volume. So when we start mixing, we'll be playing with this slider here. And you may notice that I have it set to default to -9. That's so I can make sure to have some headroom. So as I'm mixing, I'm not always like clipping the whole or distorting the overall signal. And yeah, let's just keep going. Well, we're all experts now, right? So insert another MIDI channel, rename it to open hat, and then grab another open hat. Not that one. That's a good one. I'll select. Oh, sorry. Got to drag it into my MIDI channel. And I'll select 4 beats here. And now I want to do every other 8th note. So I'm going to change my grid to 1/8. Switch to inserting notes and put one on every other 8th note. Get this. You can hear the clap is still way too loud, so I'll turn it down. I'll bring the open hat up a bit, maybe -6 or whatever. Doesn't matter for these purposes, but yeah. Oh, and let me loop it too, so that we. There we go. And let's add some. Let's finish up with some closed hats. And here's where we'll. Not that. Sure, that's fine. Find closed hat. And now we want 16th notes, so we'll do. Want to make sure I'm on C3. On 2. Skip where the open hat is, so we're not fighting for space.
How do you get back the MIDI note editor?
Let's see. If you click away, you click on the clip. Is that doing it for you? Okay. And then, yeah, so we start typing in notes. You can also, by the way, how did I do that? You can also zoom in on like the specific part of your set of notes in the piano roll. Use all. Anyway, so we've got our first set of 3/16 notes. We'll just paste them or duplicate them several times. And so let's use that velocity concept to create a little bit more of an organic feel, because like by default it's going to sound like more of a machine gun, like da 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 da, like this. And maybe that's what you want, but typically, like if a human wants something to sound a little bit more groovy, they'll hit the notes with more or less intensity. And the way to a guiding principle here is that you want your downbeats to be the loudest, the most emphatic, and then as we get further and further away from like the like critical beats of your groove, the quieter you want to make your sound. So when I say downbeat, I mean like the first note of the measure. So right, like with the kick drum, we're putting a lot of emphasis on every quarter note, right? So in between those spaces, we want to like take our foot off the gas a little bit, and then in between those spaces, we want to get even quieter. So our first hi-hat hit can be full volume. We'll put it at 127. And maybe for the second one, we'll bring it down, to taste, let's say. And then same thing with this fourth one here. So these particular 16th notes, they're not as important. So they don't need as much emphasis. This 8th note in here is already going to get emphasized by the open hat, and then of course the clap is going to put a lot of emphasis on the second and fourth beats. But here we want first hit's loudest, and the second hits are like quieter. So it's like da 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 da, and that'll create like a nice that'll break up the monotony of the machine gun velocity sound.
Which one of these is like open down there right now?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we're looking at the closed hats. So let me hold Alt. If you hold Alt and put your mouse over the like line dividing up the tracks, you can, and then you click and drag, you can shrink all of them at once. So we're editing this. And yes, I've got loud, soft, soft, loud, soft, soft. Hit that a couple times. So you might be able to hear this difference. I'm going to max them all out again. Right, it kind of like backs off and creates this like, starts to get that groove associated with it. And then of course you can add the swing 16th groove to make it even funkier. And if you really want to take it a step further, you could even make like the second, you could make these second and fourth initial hits a little bit quieter. So now in the course of the whole measure, like your first hit is the loudest and then everything else is a little bit quieter and then your first hit's the loudest. So, you know, you can push this idea pretty far. But, you know, if you just make the second and fourth closed hat in your group a little bit quieter, you're already off to a great start. Just checking for messages. Okay. Right, so this is nice. Now we can swap out these samples as we please. We can, you know, have a lot of control over the MIDI notes. One thing that can potentially get out of hand here is that we've got like, you know, one track per every single instrument. So if I start adding more and more percussion, for instance, I might end up with like so many tracks, and then that's difficult if you know, are on the lower version, let's say, of the of Ableton. So let's look at a third workflow. So you can, you know, save your project if you like.
So is this just like a different way? Like, so this is just an alternative to the first workflow? Like you could make the same thing?
Yeah, so you can make a beat that sounds exactly the same as in our first example. And actually, like if I wanted to even, you know, further replicate that velocity thing on the weaker hi-hat hits, I can go in and click on this clip here, let's say, and bring down the gain a little bit. So now it's slightly quieter. And I'll copy and paste that here, and then I will duplicate this whole section. And then I'll consolidate it so y'all can really see what I'm talking about. You can see that this first hit is like physically taller. It's got more energy in it than the second two, and it'll sound relatively louder.
Is it just easier to do with the simpler?
There's trade-offs, right? So with the simpler, you have control over a lot of parameters. You can swap out the sample if you change your mind as to what kind of sound you want. So, but with audio, it's like more immediate, and you know, you'll find your own workflow. A lot of people do like this audio-based workflow too, because you're like committing. Like once you find your right sample, you just commit to it and you keep it moving. And as Cameron pointed out, if you're running MIDI notes through a synth, that's going to require more processing power from your CPU. So you like for simple sample playback, like with a simpler, it's probably not going to be too bad. But there are some software synths that are really CPU intense, and so you want to get them into audio as fast as possible. And also, audio has its own options for manipulation that you don't get from MIDI, because MIDI is like, you know, play this note at this time, and after that I don't know what's going on. But with audio, it's like, okay, let me tweak the values that comprise the audio itself, so you can have different like sound manipulation capabilities. And you'll, you know, as you make more beats, you'll find which approaches you like better, or which situations to use them in. So let's look at this third technique. We're going to use one of those drum kits or drum racks from the when we were talking about the different instruments with Ableton. So drum rack, it's a MIDI instrument. You can find it by typing in drum rack. If you click and drag it in here, you'll create a new MIDI track with your drums in there. And all those presets we saw in the drums section, they're all based off of this. So with a blank drum rack, now we can start putting in our own samples there. So let's find a kick drum sample. It's fine. Let's find a clap. You see I dragged it onto one of the drum pads here. By the way, it looks like this is the sort of instrument that the drum rack is aping. Yeah, these are what those drum pads look like. Kind of got lost on the MIDI process. Okay, is it possible to revisit or go slower? Sure. We'll in our fourth and final example, we will show the MIDI bit again, but this is also being recorded, and I'll send you a tutorial video afterwards that covers all this, so you can review it. I just want to make sure I get through everything by the end of time, but I will try to go a little bit slower on the MIDI bits here in the next section. Oh, how do I change? Oh, Henry asks, how do you change the zoom of the MIDI keyword? I can only see one measure. Oh, so when you're editing a MIDI clip, like when I create a MIDI clip that's one measure long, I can only see this clip here. There's nothing in the editor view here. There's nothing beyond that. If I want to edit more times worth of MIDI data, then I need a longer clip. So maybe I select like 2 measures. I right click and I insert an empty MIDI clip there. And now my clip has 2 measures worth of data. By the way, you can also you can do the same consolidation maneuver with MIDI data too. So if I have 2 clips here, I can select them both and I can join them together. And now I have 4 measures worth of MIDI data. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So the drum rack, right? Actually, let me just show y'all what it would look like if we pull up one of the preset drum kits. So, I mentioned an 808 earlier. So why don't we use the 808 kit that comes with Ableton? So I'm going to click and drag that into our empty space here. Has to load a bunch of samples. It's also got some extra effects on here apparently. Oh, and I like how they did the color scheme similar to an actual 808. Anyway, so now the nice thing about this is that all of our drum sounds are going to be on a single track, right? They're going to be nice and consolidated. And when we create a new MIDI clip, here we'll make one measure again. And like you may have seen before, we get, instead of getting like every single note in the world, we have exactly 1 note per sample. So we're nice and organized here. So now when we want to make our 4 on the floor beat, pencil icon, right? That's how we insert and delete notes. We'll put 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know I've been saying kick drum a lot. Kick drum, bass drum, same thing. And again, it doesn't matter that these notes are shorter because the drum rack is set to trigger mode by default. So it's just going to play the whole sample no matter how short the MIDI note is. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll come up here to our hand clap. We'll put 2 and 4 here. Actually, let's use the snare drum instead, 2 and the 4. And then quick lesson on layering. One nice thing too about MIDI is that it becomes easier to layer sounds together because you can have one MIDI note trigger multiple samples. Well, actually, I guess in this case we're technically using 2 different MIDI notes, but on our 4th hit, let's have a clap playing as well. So we've got a snare and a clap playing. So now our drum beat, it's going to be do do clap, right? We'll have a little bit more emphasis on that last beat, and that'll help create more of a flowing groove as well. And here's our open hi-hat channel, so we'll put those on every other 8th note. And where's the closed hat? Oh, closed hi-hat right there. Put that on 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, This does make it a little bit more difficult to select individual notes, like especially if you want to change up the velocities. So I don't always like using the drum rack for that reason, but again, it can be very fast to like get something down on paper. And if I want to like maybe if I want to just alter the velocity for these two notes, I will select them both, and then I can drag them down here. And then of course, I want to make sure that carries over through the rest of the four measures. So So what does that sound like? Let's loop it. Also, the snare needs to be a little bit louder, so I'm gonna select the snares, push them up. There we go. And you'll see that it didn't also, the kick drum is still the same volume. And you can layer the snare and the claps, even though they kind of are in the same frequency range. Like claps tend to be a little bit higher pitched than the snares, so they still play nicely together. There's other ways too we can get them to kind of what's called gluing sounds together, like really making them sound like a single coherent sound. So this is one. This is how you would use the drum rack. But again, now I can't process any of these specific drum sounds separately. Like if I want to do something just on the high frequency drum sounds, can't really do that easily because they're all like everything's on the same channel. Like if I put a I don't know, let's say drum bus. This is a really useful effect, by the way, for your drums. It's called drum bus. It's like a combination of saturation and compression, so to make your drums punchier, fatter, etc. So you often do. It is often nice to put them on the entire drum group because, like, when the kick and the hat are hitting together at the same time, the drum bus effect will squash and glue them together, if that makes sense. Or when the kick, snare, and closed hat are all hitting at the same time, it'll like glue them together. This will probably sound pretty dramatic. I'll turn on the compressor and bring down the dry wet a little bit, maybe to 20, because a little bit goes a long way here. By the way, dry wet, that's a very common setting on effects. Basically means how much of the signal is getting the effect on it. So if we're at 0% or completely dry, it means the effect is not doing anything at all. If I have the dry wet at 100%, so maximally wet, it means all of the signal has the effect on it. And with different effects, you want different dry wet settings, but in this case, I'll put it at a moderate value. If I start cranking it up, you'll hear the difference. It's like really in your face. So something to play around with. Let's see. Is there one that is better than the other when using drum rack versus having each sound in a different track? Right. So we'll get in. So we'll do the final workflow now where I kind of combine all the different approaches. And this is how I prefer to work because you get a lot of control over the different sounds, but you also can process them as a group together. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to create a new MIDI track, a new project. And so we'll start with a MIDI track, and we're going to use it for the kick drum. Now, like I said, the kick drum is super important. It deserves its own throne, its own special channel to be on. So pull up the kick. That's not sure. Okay, drag that in. And then rename that. And then I'm going to create another MIDI track. And this one I'm going to use a drum rack. I'm going to use this for the clap and the snare. And this way I can do that same, like, have the snare hit on the second beat and then have the snare and the clap hit on the fourth beat. So snare, clap. And I'll grab a drum rack and put it on that channel. And I'll grab a snare. Not that one. Not that one. That's too much. That is also way too much. Yeah, you see how like choosing the specific sound you want is really important because it completely changes the whole groove. Sure, that's fine. So I'll put my snare on one of these channels, and then I'll put the clap on another, or sorry, on a different pad. That's good. All right, so now I'll do 4 on the floor pattern for the kick, right? So I select one measure of time here in the arrangement view. Insert a new MIDI clip. Put 4 on the floor here, and then I will do something similar for the snare and the clap. I'll put snare on the 2 and the 4, and I'll put the clap on the 4. So I get this. And then I'm going to make another MIDI channel. And this one I'm going to use another drum rack this is going to be for the hi-hats. So those are high frequency information. So I want to, oops, not that. So I want to group those together. So closed hat, sure. And then open hat, sure. And then I'm going to make my same pattern as usual there. Open hat, every other 8th note. 2. Closed hats on the 1, 2, and the 4 of each beat. Get this. Oh yeah, let's loop it too. And then, while we're here, let me show you some other percussion. Sorry, this is hats. We'll add some toms. These are kind of like it's sort of like a snare without the crispy bead things that hit the base of the snare, and they can be at different pitches. They tend to be like a low mids in terms of where they lay in the frequency spectrum. So I want a tom here. Sure, that's fine. And here we'll get kind of a moombah sort of sound. We want that doom da doom dun doom da doom dun. So we want a note here on the 4th 16th note on the first beat. So dun dun, and then we want another tom here on the 3rd 16th note of the 2nd beat. And we can duplicate that. And I know this is playing at the same time as the open hat, but again, because the tom is like in the low register, the hat is in the upper register, they'll play nicely together. So we get this kind of sound. Okay, and then we could add other percussion as well there. It's just like a way to stay organized. And then, so now we've got like things kind of logically grouped by the role they're playing in the track. We don't have 8 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tracks. We've consolidated a little bit, but we're still staying pretty organized here. And now if we want to process all of our drums together in one group, we can select all of the tracks here, right? Click the top one, hold down Shift, click the bottom one, and press Control G to group them. Now we've got this group up here. So now we can put some effects on the entire set of drums, such as, for instance, our drum bus. And we can go, all out here. Oh, I realized I didn't include any audio here, but in our last 10 seconds here, we can add a little reverse sound just before the snare and clap hits on the 2 and the 4. This is difficult to do in MIDI because you're going to want to like trim you're going to want to line up the end of the sample with the beginning of the note rather than the beginning. So I'll grab like some kind of like noise sound, or like let's just do a reverse snare. That's going to be the easiest. Okay, this should work. Okay, so I'm going to drag this into our arrangement view. It's already an audio clip. I'm going to shorten it so it's 1 beat long. And then if you right click, you can select, you can say reverse clip. Now it's going to go, right, like this. So that's going to create this nice lead-in sound right before the clip. And because I trimmed it to be 1 beat long and then reversed it, it lines up perfectly right before the other hit happens. And then I'll put that here as well, so it does it before there. For these reverse sounds, this is kind of like a sweetener, so it doesn't need to be super loud, so I'll bring down the volume. Now we get this. Here how it creates that kind of like sucking sound that like draws you in, and maybe you only want it on the second time. That creates like a little bit of a groove. So I know we're 2 minutes over, so appreciate y'all for sticking around. But that's basically an introduction to Ableton and making drum beats. Your homework is going to be to make a few drum beats yourself, and in particular, pick a song that you're like really, pick a few songs that you're really inspired by, and as best as you can, try to recreate like some drum patterns from those songs, right? It's a lot easier to make up tracks, by being inspired by other tracks we already like. So use those as a starting point and try to like listen carefully to the drums and try to recreate some of the drum patterns you hear. Even if they're not like 4 on the floor house beats the way we've made here. We're starting to train our ears to be able to hear the sounds out there in the world that we want to bring into our own productions. So I believe that is it. And I'll send out an email to recap all this, and I'll send out the tutorial video that has just this bit in like a more focused section. And then this recording will be available to watch afterwards. So thanks everyone for coming by to the first session.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. It kind of is mind blowing how you just like made a beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once you like, I know I kind of went slow, but once you get the hang of it, you can just like get the basics down real fast, and then start like doing the higher level artistic pieces.